I never thought the worst morning of my life would start with pancakes. I had a full stack going on the griddle, blueberries bubbling in the batter, the way Tyler likes them, when the front door came off its hinges. Not knocked open. Not kicked in. Off its hinges entirely, like it had been hit by something mechanical and final. By the time I turned around, there were 4 officers in tactical gear filling my kitchen, and a woman I hadn't seen in 9 years was standing behind them, in a white blazer, pointing at me like I was a wanted poster come to life. She looked expensive. That was the first thing I noticed. The last time I saw my sister Diane, she was wearing flip-flops in November and borrowing $20 for gas. The woman standing in my kitchen now had highlights in her hair and rings on every finger. She had done something to her face that made her look younger and harder at the same time, like a fruit that had been waxed and put under glass. "That's him," she said to the officer beside her. "That's the man who took my children. I want you to understand something before I tell you the rest of this. I am 62 years old. I spent 31 years as a diesel mechanic for the County Highway Department in Harlan, Ohio. I have 2 bad knees and a hearing aid in my left ear. I have never in my life been afraid of hard work, bad weather, or a problem that needed fixing. But when those handcuffs clicked around my wrists, and when I heard Tyler's voice from upstairs shouting my name, I felt something I had not felt since the night our father died. I felt completely alone. Before I tell you what was inside the lockbox at the bottom of my tool chest, please hit that like button and subscribe to Revenge Chronicles. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from tonight. It helps more than you know. My name is Frank Cawley. Everybody calls me Frank. Nobody calls me Francis unless they want trouble. I live on a 12-acre property outside Harlan that I bought in 1998 with a down payment I saved over 7 years of double shifts and skipped vacations. It is not a fancy place. The porch sags on one side, and the barn out back is held together partly by paint and partly by stubbornness. But the heat works, the roof doesn't leak, and for 9 years it has been the only home Tyler and Cora have ever known. Diane is my younger sister by 4 years. Growing up, she was the kind of beautiful that made people forgive her for things they wouldn't forgive anyone else. She was charming when she wanted something, and invisible when she didn't. She married a man named Garrett Webb when she was 23. Garrett was a decent man, a veteran, quiet and steady in the way that some soldiers get after they come home. He worked at the Walmart distribution center and kept his lawn cut and paid his taxes. He deserved better than what Diane gave him. They had Tyler first, then Cora, 18 months later. From the outside, it looked like a family. From the inside, I don't think Diane ever stopped feeling like the walls were closing in. She liked bars, and she liked the men she met in them. She liked the idea of a life that didn't include homework and pediatrician appointments and a husband who went to bed at 9:30. When Tyler was 8 and Cora was 6, she made her choice. It was a Thursday in October. Garrett was working an overnight shift. Diane showed up at my house at 7 in the evening with both kids in their pajamas and a Walmart bag with some clothes in it. She said Garrett had agreed to let her take a few days to clear her head. She said she just needed to breathe. She asked me to watch them until Sunday. She hugged them both quickly, like she was running late for something, and she walked out to the car where a man I didn't recognize was waiting in the passenger seat with the window down. She never came back. Garrett was devastated but not surprised. He signed the paperwork that gave me emergency guardianship and threw himself into his job and into being the father he'd always been. He called every Sunday. He drove down from his new apartment in Columbus every 3rd weekend to take the kids to dinner. He was doing the best he could. And for 2 years, it looked like maybe we were going to find a kind of normal. Then Garrett died. It was his heart. He was 41 years old, and his heart just stopped during a morning run. The paramedics found him on the sidewalk, 2 blocks from his apartment. Tyler was 10. Cora was 8. I sat them down at this same kitchen table, and I told them, and the sound Cora made is something I will carry to my grave. After the funeral, a lawyer from a veterans organization contacted me. Garrett had a life insurance policy through the military, a good one. He also had a pension that he had quietly been building for years. Together, They came to just over $800,000. Garrett had named his children as equal beneficiaries. He had not updated the documents to include a guardian designation, which meant the money went into a trust managed by the probate court until both children reached the age of majority. The court appointed me as their legal guardian. As the guardian, I received a modest monthly stipend for their care. The principal sat untouched. I never touched a cent of it beyond what the court allowed. I want to be clear about that. I put every allocated dollar into their accounts, and I kept records of every transaction in a green ledger I stored in my tool chest under the workbench in the garage. I have receipts going back 9 years. School clothes, dental bills, the inhaler Cora needs for her asthma, the cleats Tyler wore through 2 seasons before they fell apart at the seams. For 9 years, Diane sent nothing. Not a birthday card, not a Christmas call, not a text message. Tyler stopped asking about her around the time he turned 12. Cora stopped a year after that. They did not forget her. You do not forget the person who left you in pajamas on a Thursday night. They just filed her away somewhere deep and quiet, where it couldn't hurt them every single day. Then she came back. The morning she showed up with the officers and the white blazer, Tyler was 17 and Cora was 15. Tyler was a junior, starting point guard on the varsity basketball team, and had a 3.4 gigapascals. Cora was a sophomore who wanted to be a marine biologist, and who filled every notebook she owned with drawings of fish and coral and deep-sea creatures she'd never seen in person. I had been planning to take them to the ocean for the first time, that coming summer. I had been saving for it the way I save for everything, $20 at a time in a coffee jar on the counter. I never got to tell them about the trip. The officer who arrested me was professional. He read me my rights and he did not enjoy it. I could see that. He kept his eyes above my head when he told me I was being charged with custodial interference and unlawful detention of a minor. 2 counts, 1 for each child. Diane stood behind the officers and watched me with an expression I can only describe as satisfied, in the way that a person is satisfied when something they have been planning for a long time finally happens on schedule. Tyler came downstairs in his socks and stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at his mother for a long moment without speaking. He was almost 6 feet tall. He had Garrett's build and Garrett's quiet eyes. He looked at her the way you look at something you recognize but cannot quite place, like a word you know but cannot remember. "Tyler, baby," Diane said, and her voice shifted into something softer, something rehearsed. "It's okay. Mommy is here now. Everything is going to be okay." Tyler looked at me. "Uncle Frank," he said, his voice steady. "Tell me what to do." "Stay inside," I said. "Keep Cora inside. Do not go anywhere with anyone until I can get a lawyer on the phone. Do you understand me?" He nodded. He did not cry. "That boy is made of something I do not have a name for." They walked me out in handcuffs past the neighbors on both sides. Gerald from across the road was standing on his porch with his coffee, and he raised his hand at me, and I knew he understood. Gerald is a man who knows the difference between a criminal and a man being processed like one. The county jail smelled like every county jail I had ever heard described, cleaning product over something older and worse. They put me in a holding area with 7 other men, and I sat on a bench and thought about the pancakes still on the griddle and hoped Tyler had the sense to turn off the stove. My public defender arrived 2 hours later. Her name was Karen Shipley, and she was not young, but she was not confident either. She had the look of a woman carrying too many files and not enough wins. She told me the charges carried up to 8 years. She told me Diane's attorney, a man named Preston Cole who specialized in family law and had a billboard on Route 30 that said "Justice is a family value," had filed an emergency motion for immediate transfer of custody. She told me the judge had granted a temporary order and that Tyler and Cora were currently in their mother's care at the Holiday Inn off the interstate. "What about the guardianship papers?" I asked. "I have been their legal guardian for 9 years. The court appointed me." Karen shuffled her papers. "Mr. Cole is arguing that the guardianship was contingent on Mr. Webb's absence, and that now that the mother has returned and demonstrated stability, the original parental rights supersede the arrangement." "She abandoned them," I said. "She left 2 children in their pajamas and drove away with a man I'd never met." Karen looked at me with something that was almost sympathy. Mr. Cawley, the opposing counsel is going to argue that you prevented her from returning, that you intimidated her, that you created an environment she was afraid to challenge. I stared at her. She sent a birthday card once, Tyler's 9th birthday. There was no return address and no letter. Just a card with a turtle on it from a gas station. One card. In 9 years. Karen wrote something down. Do you still have it? I have everything, I said. The bail was set at $200,000. I did not have $200,000. The deed to my property was worth more than that. But I could not access the equity quickly enough to matter. I spent 3 days in that jail while Karen worked on a bond reduction. 3 days of payphones and bad food and men who watched the news on the mounted television and recognized my face. On the second night, a man twice my size decided I looked like someone he wanted to make an example of. He had seen the coverage. A local news station had run a segment that framed the story as a missing mother finally reunited with her stolen children. They used a photo of Diane looking tearful at a press conference she had apparently organized within 12 hours of my arrest. The chyron read, Harlan mother fights to reclaim family. The man didn't get to finish what he started. A corrections officer appeared before any real damage was done, but I sat against that cinder block wall with blood in my mouth and thought about Tyler and Cora in a Holiday Inn with a woman they hadn't spoken to in 9 years, and something settled in my chest that was colder and quieter than anger. It was resolve. The kind that doesn't shake. I made one phone call that evening. I called the one person I knew who understood that sometimes the only way to fight a rigged game is to change the rules entirely. Roy Danforth had been my best friend since the 8th grade. He had retired from the county assessor's office 3 years ago and now spent most of his time fishing and doing occasional work as a title researcher for a real estate firm downtown. He was not a lawyer, and he was not a detective. But Roy had spent 30 years reading property records and estate documents, and he had a particular gift for finding things that other people assumed were buried. I need you to find out why she came back, I told him on the phone. Not the story she's telling. The real reason. Start with the money. Roy did not ask questions. He just said he would call me back. He called back the next morning. Frank, he said. You need to sit down even though I know you're probably standing in a hallway with about 6 minutes left on a payphone. Tell me, Garrett's trust, the $800,000. It's been sitting in probate for 7 years, accruing interest. Current value is a little over $1.2 million. I already knew this. And what you didn't know, Roy said, is that Preston Cole filed a petition with the probate court 4 months ago requesting a review of the guardianship arrangement. He did it quietly. No notification to you because technically you weren't named as a party to the initial filing. He argued that since the children's mother was now available and stable, the trust management should transfer to her as the natural parent. I felt the chills start at the back of my neck and move down. The hearing is scheduled for next Friday, Roy said. If the guardianship transfers to Diane before the kids turn 18, she becomes the managing trustee. The court stipend alone would be $4,000 a month, and she would have discretionary authority over expenditures for the benefit of the children. She can spend it, I said flatly. She can spend a significant portion of it legally on things the court would classify as housing, travel, educational enrichment, and therapeutic support. By the time Tyler turns 18 and the money reverts to him directly, there may not be much left. I stood in that hallway and did the arithmetic. Tyler turns 18 in 14 months. Cora turns 18 in 32 months. 2.5 years of Diane with discretionary access to $1 million trust. The numbers made me sick. She didn't come back for them, Roy. No, he said. She came back for the direct deposit. Karen managed to get my bail reduced and I was released on the 4th day on my own recognizance with an ankle monitor and a strict order to maintain 500 feet from Tyler and Cora. I drove home in Roy's truck because my own truck was still in the driveway where the officers had left it, and I sat in the passenger seat and looked at the flat Ohio fields going by and tried to think clearly. The house felt like a place that had been searched, which it had. Drawers left open. Closet contents shifted. They had been looking for something. Though, I was not sure what. Evidence of abuse, perhaps. Anything that would support the narrative Diane and Cole had been constructing. They had not found the tool chest. I went to the garage. I pulled the green ledger first. 9 years of receipts and records, organized by month and year in handwriting that my second-grade teacher would have recognized as mine. Then I opened the locked compartment in the bottom of the chest, and I took out the metal lockbox. Inside the lockbox was a phone, an old Samsung Galaxy, the kind they don't make anymore, with a cracked screen and a battery pack taped to the back with electrical tape, because the original battery had swollen and died. I had charged it every 6 months for 9 years to make sure it stayed functional. On that phone were 3 things: a series of text messages, a voicemail, and a photograph. The texts were from Diane's old number, sent over a period of 3 days shortly after she left. In the first one, she told me to tell the kids she needed time. In the second, she asked if I could handle things long-term. In the third, and this was the one I had read so many times I could recite it from memory, she wrote, "I'm signing whatever you need me to sign, Frank. I'm not coming back. I'm not cut out for this, and we both know it. Just keep them safe. I know you will. Don't look for me. I know you will." She knew. She always knew who was going to stay and who was going to leave. She just assumed that knowing was the same as being excused for it. The voicemail was from 7 weeks after she left. She had called from a number I didn't recognize, likely a disposable phone, and she had been drinking. I could hear it in the way her syllables floated past each other without quite connecting. She said she was in Tennessee. She said she was happy. She said not to put her on any legal paperwork because she didn't want the IRS finding her. She said, and this is the part that mattered, she said, "Tell them I love them, but I'm just not built for the day-to-day of it." She said I was better at all that than she ever was. She laughed when she said it, like it was a compliment. The photograph was taken the morning after she left. I had woken Tyler up early to take him to school, and while he was eating cereal, he had told me something that stopped my heart. He told me that the night before his mom left, she had made him promise not to call 911 or tell any adults what was happening. She had told him that if he told anyone, she would come back and take him away to somewhere Uncle Frank could never find him. He was 8 years old. He had spent one entire night believing that telling the truth would get him disappeared. I had taken him to a child therapist the following week, a woman named Dr. Reyes, who specialized in trauma. With the parents' permission, which in this case was mine as the emergency guardian, Dr. Reyes had documented Tyler's account in a written evaluation. I had that evaluation too, signed and stamped. But the photograph was something different. After Diane left, I found 2 of Cora's stuffed animals in the trash can in the kitchen. Not put away, not left somewhere, in the trash, like refuse. Cora was 6 years old, and her mother had thrown away her stuffed animals on the way out the door. I don't know why Diane did it. I don't think Diane knew either. It was the kind of thing a person does when they have already decided that what they are leaving behind does not matter. I photographed the animals in the trash can with my flip phone, time-stamped the same morning Diane left, and I kept that photograph on every phone I've owned ever since. Roy picked me up and drove me to meet Karen at her office. I laid everything on her desk. The ledger, the phone, the texts, the voicemail transcript I had typed up years ago, Dr. Reyes's evaluation, and every document from the court relating to the guardianship. Karen sat across from me and read for 45 minutes without speaking. When she finally looked up, she looked different. Less like a woman carrying too many files. More like someone who just found the thing she had been missing. "The voicemail," she said. "Is the phone still functional?" "I charged it 2 months ago," I said. "This text where she says she's not coming back, that she wants you to handle things long-term. That's not abandonment with intention to return. That's voluntary relinquishment, communicated in writing." "She didn't sign any formal documents," I said. "She didn't need to. In Ohio, a parent's written communication expressing intent not to return and consent for a third party to raise the children carries legal weight, especially combined with 9 years of no contact and no support. This, combined with the guardianship record and the trust management history, gives us a very solid foundation." She paused. "You kept every receipt." "I kept every receipt," I confirmed. "The voicemail is going to be the most important piece. A judge hearing that woman's voice say she isn't built for the day-to-day is going to hear something very different from the grieving reunited mother Preston Cole has been presenting to the media." That night, Roy drove me past the Holiday Inn. I stayed in the truck. I just needed to know which windows were lit. I could see lights on the 3rd floor, and I counted the rooms from the corner of the building, and I thought about Tyler in there, probably with his earbuds in, staring at the ceiling the way he does when he's processing something. I thought about Cora with no book to read because her books were all at home. I thought about her asthma inhaler, which was in the medicine cabinet in the upstairs bathroom, and whether anyone had thought to bring it. My jaw tightened. I put my hand on Roy's arm. "Drive," I said. "Just drive." The trial date was set for a Thursday, 17 days after my arrest. Preston Cole had moved quickly, and the judge assigned to the case had a reputation for efficiency that cut both ways. Karen filed counter motions and discovery requests, and worked harder than I think she had worked in years. Roy spent his days in the county records building and in the state archives, pulling documents that Cole had not anticipated anyone looking for. What Roy found about Diane did not surprise me, but it built the picture in a way that nothing else could. She had been living in Knoxville for 6 years. Before that, Memphis. Before that, somewhere in Arkansas. She had worked intermittently, waitressing and bartending, had 2 evictions on record, and a dismissed DUI from 2019. The man she had driven off with that October night in 2015 was named Dennis Schroft, and he had done 2 years in federal prison for wire fraud. They were no longer together. She had been, for the past 2 years, apparently clean and employed at a dental office in Knoxville as a receptionist. This was the stability Preston Cole had been referencing. She had found out about Garrett's trust 4 months ago. Roy traced it back to a conversation with Garrett's mother, who had mentioned the trust in a phone call without understanding the implications. Within 3 weeks of that call, Diane had hired Preston Cole. The morning of the trial, I wore the same suit I had worn to Garrett's funeral because it was the only suit I owned and because it felt right. Roy drove me. He wore a sport coat and a tie and looked uncomfortable in both. Karen met us on the courthouse steps, and she gripped my arm and said, "I need you to be quiet and patient and let the documents do the talking." I told her that was exactly what I intended. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. A Tuesday morning in Harlan County does not draw the kind of crowd that Preston Cole had perhaps hoped for. But there were reporters in the gallery. The story had gotten enough traction that 2 television cameras were set up in the back, and several of my neighbors had taken the morning off work to sit in the wooden pews and watch. Diane sat at the plaintiff's table in a dark green dress with her hands folded. She had clearly been coached to look modest. Her jewelry was understated. Her expression was one of patient suffering. She dabbed at her eyes twice before the proceedings even started, which told me the tears were ready to go on command. Preston Cole was the kind of attorney who fills a room. He was barrel-chested and loud in the way that county fair auctioneers are loud, projecting confidence through volume. He had a local reputation and several framed newspaper clippings in his waiting room, and he clearly believed, based on the press narrative he had helped construct, that this case was already over. He presented first. He laid out Diane's story with practiced gravity. A young mother, overwhelmed by circumstance. A brother who had taken advantage of her vulnerability. A woman who had spent 9 years rebuilding herself, getting clean, establishing stability, and summoning the courage to come back for her children. He spoke about Tyler and Cora's right to a relationship with their biological mother. He mentioned the trust fund only in passing, and only as evidence of the children's needs requiring a parent's full attention. He called one witness, a social worker named Paulette Marsh, who had conducted a 40-minute home visit at the Holiday Inn suite 3 days after Diane took custody. Paulette testified that the children appeared healthy, that Diane demonstrated appropriate parenting behaviors, and that the environment was suitable. She did not mention that both children had requested to call me during the visit and been denied. She did not mention that Cora had not spoken during the entire 40 minutes. Karen had cross-examined Paulette with the kind of quiet precision that I had not expected from her. She asked whether Paulette had spoken to the children's school counselors. She had not. She asked whether Paulette had reviewed the 9 years of medical and educational records in Frank Cawley's possession. She had not. She asked whether Paulette was aware that one of the children had a documented asthma condition requiring daily medication. Paulette had not been informed. Karen sat down. Cole looked slightly less comfortable than he had 10 minutes earlier. Then Karen called her witness. I watched the back of the courtroom. The door opened, and Tyler walked in. He was wearing a button-down shirt I didn't recognize. Diane must have bought it for him. He walked down the aisle without looking at her table, and he stood at the witness stand, and he spoke clearly and without flinching for 11 minutes. He told the judge about the night Diane left. He told her about the promise she had extracted from him about not calling anyone. He was 9 years old, and she had made him a promise he was afraid to break for 3 days, until I had noticed something was wrong and sat with him until he felt safe enough to tell me. He told the judge about the last 9 years. He told her what our house looked like on Christmas morning. He told her about his father visiting on weekends, and about the day I drove 4 hours in a snowstorm to get to his first varsity game. He told her about Cora's marine biology notebooks, and how I had been buying her a new one every year since she filled the first one in 7th grade. Diane's attorney objected twice. The judge overruled him both times. Then Tyler reached into the pocket of the button-down shirt and placed an object on the rail of the witness stand. It was a small, digital voice recorder, a cheap one from the office supply store. He looked at the judge. "Your Honor," he said, "3 nights ago, my mother didn't know I was awake. I recorded a phone call from the room next to hers. I want you to hear it." Cole was on his feet instantly. Objection. Illegally obtained. Hearsay. Privacy violation. The judge looked at him with the patient exhaustion of someone who has heard every objection and is not impressed by the volume of them. She asked Karen to approach. They spoke for 4 minutes at the bench. The judge returned to her seat and looked at Tyler. "Play it," she said. Tyler pressed the button. The audio was uneven, recorded through a wall, but the voices were clear enough. Diane's voice first, lower than her courtroom voice, stripped of its grief and softness. She was on the phone with someone, and she was not talking about her children's well-being. She was talking about the hearing date. She was talking about what the trust would look like once the guardianship transferred. She used the phrase, "the Frank problem," twice. She said once the money was under her control, she was looking at properties in Florida and that the kids could board at her former co-worker's sister's school in Virginia, which was cheaper than the private options closer by. The other voice on the call was Preston Cole's. At one point, Diane laughed and said something that I am going to write down exactly as she said it because it was the thing that changed every face in that courtroom. Frank raised them perfectly. That's the whole point. They're practically adults. They barely need supervision at this point. I'm not doing the hard years again. I did the cute baby phase, and then I got smart. The recording ran for 4 more minutes and then stopped. The silence in that courtroom was the complete kind. Not the silence of people being polite. The silence of people recalibrating. I looked at the jury box. There was no jury because this was a civil custody matter, but I looked at the gallery and I saw Gerald from across the road with his jaw set and his eyes hard and bright. I looked at Karen, who was very still in the way that people get still when they know something is over. I looked at Preston Cole, who had the expression of a man realizing that his client had not told him everything. And I looked at the judge. Judge Angela Sorrento had been on the bench in Harlan County for 16 years. She was known for being precise and for not suffering theatrics. She sat with the recording still reverberating in the room, and she looked at Diane for a long time before she spoke. She spoke quietly, which somehow made it louder. She said that she had presided over hundreds of custody proceedings, and that the baseline she applied to every single one was a simple question. Who has been acting in the interest of the children? She said the answer to that question in this case was not in dispute by anyone in the room, including, as the recording had just demonstrated, the opposing party herself. She said the evidence of 9 years of active, documented, loving guardianship was sufficient on its own. The recording, she said, was simply confirmation of what the documents already showed. She looked at Preston Cole and said that she would be referring the recording to the state bar for review of potential ethical violations related to his direct involvement in the custody strategy discussed on the call. Then she turned to me and she said that the charges of custodial interference and unlawful detention were dismissed in full. She awarded me permanent legal guardianship of Tyler and Cora. She recommended that the probate court appoint an independent fiduciary to manage the trust, replacing me as trustee, not because of any wrongdoing on my part, but because it was best practice and would protect everyone going forward. And then she looked at Diane and she said, in a voice that did not tremble or rise, that she had seen women fight their way back from genuine hardship and genuinely reclaim their place in their children's lives, and that she respected that struggle. But she said that what the recording demonstrated was not a mother finding her way back. It was a woman identifying an asset and constructing a case to access it. She said that distinction mattered and that the court would not reward it. Diane did not scream. She did not lunge across the table. She sat very still and looked at the surface in front of her, and something went out of her face, like a lamp being switched off. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Outside the courthouse, Tyler found me on the steps. He put his arms around me, and I held on to him the way I had been wanting to hold on to him since the morning they took me out of the kitchen in handcuffs. He smelled like that button-down shirt that was not his, and underneath it he smelled like the house, like laundry detergent and wood and coffee, like home. "Where's Cora?" I asked. "Roy has her," he said. "He went to get her from the hotel as soon as the ruling came through." I pulled back and looked at him. "You did good in there," I said. He shook his head a little. "You did good in there," he said. "For 9 years." Roy's truck pulled up to the curb 20 minutes later. Cora got out before it fully stopped, which is something Roy will tell anyone who asks about that afternoon for the rest of his life. She was wearing the wrong jacket, one of Tyler's, sleeves down to her fingers. She hit me at full speed the same way she has since she was 7 years old, and she held on without saying anything for a long time. When she finally stepped back, she looked at me with her father's serious eyes and she said, "Did you make sure the hearing is off? The ankle monitor?" I said, "Yes," she said very patiently, as if I might have forgotten something important. "First thing they did before I left the building," I said. She nodded, satisfied, and went to stand next to her brother. "That was 4 months ago. The independent fiduciary took over the trust and conducted an audit of my 9 years of management. The audit came back clean, as I knew it would. The green ledger accounted for every dollar. The new fiduciary set up accounts for both kids with appropriate allocations for educational expenses and living costs. And the principal sits untouched, earning interest, waiting for them. Preston Cole is facing a disciplinary review. I do not know what will come of it, and I find that I care less than I thought I would. Diane did not contest the ruling. I heard through Roy that she went back to Tennessee. I do not know more than that, and I have not tried to find out. Tyler and Cora know where she is and how to reach her if they want to. That is their choice to make, not mine. Roy and I took the kids to the coast in July, 3 weeks after everything settled. We drove straight through from Harlan to the Outer Banks, 14 hours in my truck with the windows down for the last 2 hours because none of us could wait anymore. Cora stood at the water's edge for a long time without speaking, watching the waves come in, studying the color of the water and the way the foam broke across the sand. I stood a few feet back and watched her. Tyler waded in up to his knees in his jeans, which he is old enough to know better about, and he looked out at the horizon and then back at me, and he grinned in the wide, uncomplicated way he used to grin when he was 9 years old, before he learned that some things require a harder face. Roy sat in a folding chair 20 feet up the beach eating a gas station sandwich and pretending not to be emotional about any of it. We stayed 4 days. We ate too much fried seafood. Cora filled half a notebook with sketches of things she found in tide pools. Tyler convinced a local kid to let him try paddleboarding and fell off 14 times and refused to quit. Roy and I sat on the porch of the rental house every evening and listened to the water and did not talk about the trial or the lawyers or the ankle monitor or any of it. On the last evening, Cora came and sat next to me on the porch steps. She had her notebook in her lap, and she was quiet for a while, the way she gets when she is deciding whether to say something. Then she said, "Uncle Frank, were you scared?" I thought about the question. I thought about the morning the door came off the hinges. I thought about the holding cell and the blood in my mouth, and the 3 days not knowing if I would make it home. I thought about the ankle monitor and the 500-foot order and the hotel windows lit up at night. "Yes," I said. "I was scared." She nodded slowly. "But you kept going anyway." "That's what you do for family," I said. She looked out at the water. "That's what you do," she said, which was not exactly the same thing, and which meant more to me than she probably knew. Tyler is going to apply to Ohio State in the spring. He wants to study sports medicine. Cora still wants to be a marine biologist, possibly more than ever after 4 days on the coast. She has a plan that involves a graduate program at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, which she explained to me in more detail than I fully followed, but which I am fully committed to supporting. I have been their uncle by blood, and their father by every definition that actually matters. I did not plan for this life. I planned for a quiet retirement, and a deck I was going to build on the south side of the house, and maybe a boat for the reservoir. Instead, I got a decade of school lunches and science fair projects and late nights at urgent care, and every possible version of love that comes without paperwork or titles or anyone asking you to do it. People talk about sacrifice like it is something you choose once. Like there is a door, and you walk through it, and you are done. It is not like that. It is 1,000 small choices made in 1,000 ordinary moments. It is the choice to stay when leaving would be easier. It is the choice to get in Roy's truck at midnight and drive to a Holiday Inn just to count the lit windows and know they are still there. It is the choice to keep the receipts, all of them, every single one, because someday the truth is going to need a paper trail. Diane chose differently. I am not here to judge her for the life that made her who she is, but I am also not going to pretend that the choice she made that October night was anything other than what it was. She chose a Mustang. She left her children in pajamas and she chose a car. I chose them. And sitting here tonight on a porch in Harlan, Ohio, with the sound of Tyler on the phone in the kitchen, and Cora's light still on upstairs at 11 p.m. because she is reading something she cannot put down, I can tell you without any doubt in my heart that it was the only choice worth making. Some things you cannot put a number on. Some things you cannot buy back once you have sold them. Diane will learn that. She may already be learning it. I know what I have. I have always known. And if my sister is watching this somewhere tonight, I want her to know something. Not with anger. Just as a fact. Those children are going to be extraordinary. They were always going to be extraordinary. You could have been there for it. That is the only thing I am sorry about. If this story touched something in you, please leave a like and subscribe to Revenge Chronicles. It means everything to this old mechanic. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from tonight. I read every single one,